Initially, when my daughter's future husband stepped into our home, my spouse seemed to lose color as if confronting a spirit. The following day, he requested a meeting with me, stating, "There's something we need to discuss, just the two of us." Emily phoned us on a Sunday and revealed she was bringing someone home. She had constructed her life in another state, the same city where she attended college, and for nearly a year she had been seeing a man there. They were already engaged. We were familiar with his name, but little else. Emily preferred the first real encounter to take place face-to-face rather than over the phone, so we waited. With the wedding approaching, he was finally coming home. To be candid, I was relieved to learn this. My daughter had endured a tough phase with men before this one. Several years took a toll on her, and I too felt the strain watching her go through it. That entire week, I prepared the house as if its condition mattered, for it did. Tom, aged 38, stood firm, a man who genuinely shook hands with sincerity. He arrived bearing flowers for Claire and a quality drink for me, and within mere minutes it became apparent why my daughter had been so serene lately. Composed, at ease as if she'd finally stopped preparing for the impending adversity. Then Claire entered from the kitchen. I was watching Emily, thus catching their interaction sideways. Claire paused in the doorway, the color instantly drained from her face. Tom, maintaining his smile, momentarily hid something behind it. The two of them stared at each other longer than usual for strangers. The tension eased and they quickly moved past it, welcoming a new family member to their big night. I went to bed content for my daughter, choosing to overlook the rest of it. Tom would call me the next day, and his phone call wouldn't concern the wedding plans. He contacted me while I was in my workshop. For nearly 3 decades, I've crafted cabinets, and my preferred workspace is the shed behind our home. That's where I received his call, with wood particles still embedded in my palms. Politeness filled his tone as he inquired if we could meet privately, the two of us, within the subsequent day or so. I assumed it was the customary request to seek paternal approval, a formal ritual. Almost, I suggested that an appointment wasn't necessary for such matters. But then he added, "It's not about the wedding, Mr. Dolan. There's something I need to discuss with you first." His delivery was peculiar, not fearful, but cautious. I agreed, and we decided on the following evening at a highway-adjacent steakhouse, a secluded spot where townsfolk don't monitor table guests. I chose the venue instinctively, without deliberation. I simply felt uneasy about hosting it at home. Back at my workbench, I struggled to complete the drawer I was assembling. My fingers seemed to halt on their own. I continually spotted Claire in the doorway, draining of color, followed by a young man requesting a private conversation with me, using a cautious tone. I chose not to inform Claire he'd contacted me. That was my initial action, diverging from the norm, a trivial deviation. I merely omitted mentioning it, and she didn't inquire about it. The steakhouse was sparsely populated. Tom was already seated when I arrived, untouched water in a glass before him. He rose to shake my hand, at which point I observed his unease. We discussed trivialities like the drive and weather for a while. Then he placed down his fork and met my gaze directly. He stated, "I intend to wed your daughter, and I wish for at least one person in this family to enter into it with their eyes open." Disclosing this to Emily would cause her pain without altering the situation. Hence, I am disclosing it to you instead, leaving you to manage it as you deem appropriate. I asked him to elaborate on his declaration. His response was soft, and I recognized that I had known your wife before these events unfolded. "You should listen first, then make your choice." My coffee was nearly to my lips when I paused. He confessed he'd already met Claire not for the first time in our foyer, but prior. It was before he and Emily crossed paths. I remained motionless. The waiter asked if the food was satisfactory, and I responded it was adequate, though untouched on my plate. My gaze returned to the man whom my daughter intended to wed, and I queried about his familiarity with my wife. He maintained eye contact during his response. He provided straightforward answers, no apologies masked as explanations. Approximately 2 years ago, Tom performed part-time driving jobs, primarily refresher lessons for adults who'd lost their confidence on the highway. Claire was one of them. She never disclosed this information to me, and that wasn't even the aspect that left me breathless. For several weeks that spring, the lessons transformed into something inappropriate. Tom didn't sugarcoat it, he labeled it as such. It persisted for a brief period and then concluded, after which they didn't encounter each other again, until he entered my living room bearing flowers and saw Emily's mother standing in my kitchen doorway. He acknowledged, "I swear to you I wasn't aware. If I had known, I wouldn't have allowed it to progress without informing Emily of everything." I found his words convincing. The peculiar aspect was that I did believe him. Sitting there with an icy feeling in my chest, I gazed at him and I believed every word he said. He wasn't a man who had targeted my family. He was 38, loved my daughter, and 2 years prior he'd made a regrettable decision involving a woman who failed to disclose her marital status. The blame here was minimal on his part. The fault lay with Claire. And for 2 years she bore the burden of it silently, through every meal, every ordinary day, every time I inquired about her day. That's the term for it now, no doubt, no concerns, it was an affair. Before we parted ways at that table, I requested Tom to keep a secret from Emily, neither before nor after the wedding. I urged him not to reveal it, as I believed that if my daughter ever discovered this, she'd be stuck between her mother and the man she adored, a position no daughter should be in. Tom seemed both relieved and ashamed. He made a promise. Then I drove home. Claire was awake, standing in the kitchen when I entered. She appeared just as she had the night before, pale, braced, and waiting to learn how much her husband knew. I placed my keys down and said, "Tom is a good man. He expressed his love for Emily, and I granted them my approval." Claire perceived it, right there in front of me, that Tom remained silent, that the secret was hidden, that she had walked up to the edge without taking the plunge. The air seemed to leave her slowly. Her shoulders relaxed, a faint smile flickered. I remained silent. I ascended to bed. Let me make this clear. I was not a man stuck at my kitchen table that night, praying the situation would dissipate. By the time I departed from the restaurant, I had already grasped the conclusion. I merely hadn't disclosed it to her yet. I spent time in the store afterwards while she climbed up. I was aware of the financial toll the following weeks would take, and I knew I would face every one of them head-on. Claire remained unaware that any of it had even begun. The days preceding a wedding are quickly filled. Caterers, the dress, the seating arrangement, deciding who sits where. Claire immersed herself in all of it, and amidst it all I observed her transform back into a woman with an empty mind. She hummed in the kitchen once more. She slept soundly. Each of those days I left her the same tranquil evening, providing ample room for her to utter 4 words. I didn't expect her to do so. By that point I was aware of the outcome. All I wished to ascertain was if she would ever realize it. One evening we were sorting laundry, an ordinary occasion, when Claire paused with one of my shirts and said, "Mark, there's something I've been meaning to tell you." I remained still. I didn't urge her on or stop her. I waited. She hesitated for a moment before looking down at the shirt and mentioning that the florist had scheduled 2 appointments. She had to exchange the arrangements. Wasn't that inconvenient? She folded the shirt, moved on. That was as close as she ever came. With one sentence, she shut a door in her own hand while I stood just feet away holding the other half of the laundry. On another occasion, she began planning our anniversary for the fall. Somewhere near water, she said, like we used to. She was constructing a future for us both aloud, leaving out the one crucial detail. So I made my own plans silently. Visited a lawyer, later found a folder in the store. Prior to that, there was a wedding, followed by a day where she would learn everything at once. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep and went to the store to review the papers. Everything was in order. After placing them aside, I returned home. Next morning, I became Emily's father-in-law. Despite the hardship of that day, it wasn't as expected. Smiling was effortless due to Emily's ease. She found me before the ceremony, adjusted my tie, and expressed her unwavering certainty in me. "You always had a knack for reading people, Dad," she said. The moment I blessed this event, fear subsided. I held onto that feeling. Escorted my daughter down the aisle, entrusting her to a man whose trustworthiness was evident. Throughout the entire event, Claire stood beside me, intertwining our fingers for pictures and flashing smiles at acquaintances from 2 decades ago. The remnants of fear in her subsided. She was no longer feigning. She genuinely believed it now. The secret had managed to survive the wedding, and for her, that moment signified overcoming everything. However, she misunderstood the situation. She thought the wedding itself was the threat. Surviving the tranquil aftermath of the wedding, she believed herself safe. But in reality, the wedding was the last obstacle between her and the truth, which she had just witnessed come to an end. As per plan, I played my part until the final guest departed. It was all for Emily, and I would do it again. Once the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, Claire and I drove home. Our house fell into a silence typical of homes after a significant day. Claire discarded her shoes and commented on how flawlessly everything had transpired, how content Emily appeared. She was still immersed in the wedding. I asked her to take a seat at the kitchen table. She maintained a faint smile. I stepped out, retrieved the envelope from the store, and placed it on the table before her. Opposite my spouse, I spoke without the tenderness that had characterized our conversations for 25 years. "I know all," I said, revealing a secret Tom had shared with me just a couple of days after he met you. Her smile vanished as quickly as the color in a doorway. She didn't touch the envelope. Instead, she fixated on it. The wedding was ideal, Emily is content, and she need not know any of this. But our relationship is over. Here are the divorce papers. For a brief instant, she made no sound at all. The hum of the refrigerator and a distant car were the only sounds. 25 years of marriage lay on the table encased in a paper envelope, and Claire regarded it as though it weighed nothing. Then she began to speak. Rapidly and softly, she uttered my name. She clarified it wasn't as I imagined, stating it was 2 years past, concluded before it mattered, and she had planned to tell me countless times. I allowed her to finish explaining. I waited weeks for this moment to hear it from her without prompting. Once she ran out of words, she fell silent and washed the non-existent stain on my face. No anger to counter, no shouting to endure. Perhaps that's when it struck her that I had made up my mind long ago at a roadside steakhouse, and nothing she said now could rewind time. She whispered, "You'd already decided weeks ago?" To which I responded, "Yes." That night, she inquired how I could dine across from her every evening since without uttering a word, and that was the query I had been anticipating. I replied, "The hardest part, it wasn't the 2 years ago incident, it was waiting for this moment. 2 years ago, I could have accepted our situation if you had been honest with me before the wedding. Yet you left the door open for conversations every quiet night, yet chose to remain silent each time. There was no explanation, we both knew it by then. The affair was merely a side issue. The true harm extended far beyond those 2 years." Every time she sat across from me, she repeated her actions. She did so until the day before our daughter's wedding. I decided to end the conversation that night. I told her the papers could wait for morning, and I retired to bed, finally getting a full night's sleep after weeks of turmoil. A man can rest peacefully once he has relinquished his burden and the other person takes responsibility for their own share. The divorce proceeded without contention. Claire had no fight left within her, and I didn't require one. The townhouse was sold in less than a month. I signed the papers, feeling nothing I needed to suppress. I moved to the lakeside house, an old residence. For as long as I've existed, my family has possessed it. For many years, I'd been completing it gradually, one room at a time. Now, with ample time on my hands, I installed the final kitchen cabinets myself, crafted doors that bore my own handiwork. The house was finally complete, and it belonged to me with not a single wall containing secrets. Emily visits almost every month, accompanied by Tom. She assumes her parents simply drifted apart, as some people do, and that explanation will suffice for her. She's content, and Tom treats her kindly, fulfilling his promise. When their car appears on the driveway, I feel genuine joy with no burdens lurking beneath it. People inquire if I still harbor anger. I tell them the truth. No, I am not angry. Claire didn't lose me due to a 2-year affair. I could have forgiven him 2 years ago. She lost me at our very own kitchen table, on numerous silent nights. Each time she had the opportunity to be honest with me, and instead chose the easy path. I provided every opportunity for that woman to progress, but she chose not to take any. In the end, I made the final decision, carrying it out with pride and no regret. This morning, I took a pot of coffee onto the porch I had recently completed, sitting where the water could be seen filtering through the trees. There was no one on the other side of the table, no one scrutinizing my expression to gauge what I knew but wasn't disclosing. After carrying that burden alone for weeks, I returned it to its rightful owner and retained the one thing that was always mine throughout, my dignity. I constructed that house with my own hands and earned every penny, and the man on the porch could say the same about himself. 2 individuals encountered a similar predicament here. Tom barely knew Mark, yet refused to construct a marriage around a secret. Claire had spent 25 years with him and couldn't bring herself to disclose it over her own kitchen table. That is the essence of the situation. If she confessed to Mark herself, a past error openly acknowledged often proves manageable in a lengthy union. However, what it might endure is discovering your spouse prioritized their ease over yours, and their comfort consistently displayed.